a mysterious time. We're living in serious times. So strengthen your mind. We're living in serious times. It's such a mysterious time. We're living in serious times. You do not know if your friend or enemy or a friend. Right now things are hectic, so who is serious or playing tricks? We prefer meditation. Don't stop in nothing foolish. Keep your heart clean and strong. Let your God self be established and strengthen your mind. We're living in serious times. It's such a mysterious time. We're living in serious times. Strengthen your mind. We're living in serious times. It's such a mysterious time. We're living in serious times. Take this advice a mother once gave to her son. Give not all your strength unto the lecherous woman, nor to the ways that can destroy a true king man. 'Cause Delilah's on the prowl and she's a deadly one. So strengthen your mind. We're living in serious times. It's such a mysterious time. We're living in serious times. Strengthen your mind. We're living in serious times. It's such a mysterious time. We're living in serious times. And this is surely not the time to backslide. Don't let the wrong thoughts take you for a ride. Temptation pretty and a dazzle in your eyes. Your role in this world you have to realize. 'Cause it's a you the serpent one brutalize. So strengthen up yourself, your youth and your wife. Bring forth good fruit, child, the future of we life. Bring forth good fruit, child, the future of we life. Oh, strengthen your mind. We're living in serious times. It's such a mysterious time. We're living in serious times. Strengthen your mind. We're living in serious times. It's such a mysterious time. We're living in serious times. Strengthen your mind. We're living in serious times. It's such a mysterious time. We're living in serious times. Serious times. We're living in serious times. It's such a mysterious time. We're living in serious time. And this is surely not the time to backslide. Don't let the wrong thoughts take you for a ride. Temptation pretty and a dazzle in your eyes. Your role in this world you have to realize. 'Cause it's a you the serpent one brutalize. So strengthen up yourself, your youth and your wife. Bring forth good fruit, child, the future of we life. Bring forth good fruit, child, the future of we life.
All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This is another live stream. I know it's been a while since I've done these, but I'm back at it. I'm hoping that I will be consistent at it. Today is going to be a very interesting topic, and this will be a start of a series that I will be working on. For how long it will take. Right now, I do have a guest with me, Makai.
Shalom. It's a pleasure.
Good.
It's a pleasure.
Right. So, if you have anything to add while I'm going over this, feel free.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of funny because we're talking about doing a podcast as well, so this might as well be the start of it.
Right.
Not making any guarantees to my 15 subscribers who are not watching. Just kidding. But we're going to just get started. So, hold on real quick. All right. So, taking care of my P's and Q's real quick. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. So we will be using articles in this video, but in future videos we'll also be using videos by other people about this topic. And so this is just to let YouTube know that this is for educational purposes and commenting. All right, so without further ado, let's get into the topic. So today we're going to be talking about corn, not the type that you eat, but the type that you watch. And we're going to talk about it because it's a very complex topic. You know, a lot of people have different opinions about this thing. And the thing about it, when we look into what Yahuwah says, when you talk about the letters by Paul, when it talks about fornication and the lusting of the eyes, we know that it is an abomination to him. However, it's still a struggle for us, particularly men, and I know women go through this too, but in this episode, these series, I will primarily be coming from the perspective of a man, since I actually went through that struggle as one. But if you as a woman want to watch this and get edification from this, all praise to the Most High. So the title of this series is called Corn, or, well, due to censorship, we won't say it, but Corn, the drug war no one talks about. Because whether you know it or not, this so-called entertainment is a drug. So this is just the intro video to the series. And again, I wanted to create this series because I went through this myself. And a lot of men, a lot of people go through this struggle. And we look at YouTube videos over and over again. We go on semen retention, nofap, all these things. And it seems as though they have, at least from my experience, they were only short-term solutions to a long-term problem. So I figured, you know what, I need to go in depth into this topic of corn so people can actually find ways to overcome it. So the content of this series, I want to go over that because, again, when you watch other videos, you're going to find these things that are on this slide. So number one, there's not going to be any insults to your intelligence. We're not going to call you an incel. We're not going to call you weird for watching that because there are mental issues, spiritual issues that play a part into people watching this type of content. So we're not going to insult you, not going to call you weird. There will be some accountability. The information I put out may cut you a little bit, but that's just because it's the truth. You know, the Most High in His Word says that the Bible is a two-edged sword cutting both the bone and the soul. So it will cut you, but we're not just going to go outright and call you names and all that stuff. Number two, we're not going to focus more on results. And the reason why is because that puts us in a rushing mindset. Overcoming this struggle takes a process. And too many times, oh man, I'm going to get the woman attraction. I'm going to do this. I'm going to have so much energy and all this stuff. And you're more focused on that you forget about the strategies that you need to get to that point. And my dad used to tell me, take it one step at a time. So that's what we want to encourage in this series. Which leads me to the next point, which is no clickbait thumbnails. When you go on these no-fap videos, these red pill videos that talk about corn, they have these beautiful looking women like, 15 days on semen retention causes more woman attraction. And you're like, oh my, let's click that. And then you're more focused on that. And even when you overcome that, which was what I had a problem with, is that's not worth it. And we're going to focus more on that later on in the series. So again, no clickbait thumbnails about woman attraction or more energy. We're just going to give you the facts. And before, we're also going to give you an in-depth spiritual breakdown of this addiction. We're going to give you the societal, biological, mental, and spiritual aspects that play in to how you got into this addiction or just watching it in general, and how you get out of watching it or out of that addiction. And at 5, we're going to give you real and effective biblical strategies to overcome this struggle. So And listen, I'm very excited. I've been wanting to do this for months now, so I'm really excited. So I cannot wait to get started. So without further ado, let's get started. So when it comes to corn, we have to get to the basics of these things. In order to grasp the addiction known as corn, we have to understand the word addiction. We also have to understand the word drug. We also need to understand how these things both affect both the mind and the body. All right? Because too many times we're focused on that corn. Right? Corn is the problem. Corn is the problem. And yes, it is a problem, but there are other factors that lead us to watching that. There's the thing about watching corn that produces something in the brain that keeps us going back to that. So we can't just tackle corn. We got to tackle addiction and drugs. So we're just going to go over the basics. This is why it's the introduction video. So, addiction. Got this on the dictionary here. It is the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. You have your synonyms here: dependency, dependence, craving, and a good one here is enslavement. Right? So when you're addicted, you're craving, you are dependent on it, you're a slave to it. Right? And so when you understand that the addiction controls your life. You know, you have something else to do, but it's like, well, I can't today because, this addiction tells me to appease the addiction, right? So that's really what addiction is.
And I wanted you to touch on, too, the difference between addiction and an appetite.
Good point.
Because sometimes we confuse those and think we're going as an addiction. It's not really an addiction. It's just you have a sinful appetite for that.
Interesting. I think appetite, it would be like you just want to do it, basically. You know, you have it's still a craving, but it's not like an addiction. It enslaves you. Appetite, you have a choice to keep going to it over and over again. I feel like that's what do you think?
I think that it's good for those who are going through or having porn addiction or watching porn to understand the difference between the two, because you don't want to mislabel it and think that, let the devil beat you down, and condemn you, because at the end of the day, it comes down to, is this stopping you from doing your daily functions, from going to work, from doing schoolwork, or is this just something that you're doing when you're bored and you're not doing nothing? And I think it's important to ultimately not watch it, period. Right. It shouldn't be okay or tolerated because it's an appetite or an addiction. But I just thought it was important to just know the distinction, so to avoid that condemnation.
Yeah, and that's actually very important too, because the thing is, including me, based off of what Makai said, I probably wasn't addicted to it, but I did have an appetite towards it, because like you said, when there was nothing to do, or you just feeling bad, that's what I would go to. And again, that's kind of what this series is about, because we're trying to give you other strategies to help you avoid watching that. Whether you don't watch it every day, whether you watch it once in a while, which would be an appetite, we're trying to help you replace that appetite with something else. So that was pretty good. I thank you for that. So now we're back to the addiction part. When the National Institute on Drug Abuse, or National Institute of Health, it says in this article that addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite adverse consequences. It is considered a brain disorder because it involves functional changes to brain circuits involved in reward, stress, and self-control. So in other words, this act of addiction, and whatever substance it is going to rewire the brain to the point where it's going to keep going after it. No matter how much you try in the flesh, you're going to keep going back to that thing because you lost that self-control once you watch that. Goes on to say those changes may last a long time after a person has stopped taking drugs. Addiction is a lot like other diseases such as heart disease. Both disrupt the normal, healthy function of an organ in the body. Both have serious harmful effects, and both are, in many cases, preventable and treatable. If left untreated, they can last a lifetime and may lead to death. So, again, basically this article is equating addiction to a disease. So with that understanding, you have to understand how important it is that we understand the concept of addiction as it relates to any other substance, and particularly in this series, to corn. Because whether you know it or not, corn does have an effect on the rewiring process on the neurons of your brain. And, of course, on your seed as well. And we'll get into that in later series as well, or later episodes of this series. So now that we have an understanding of addiction and appetite, thanks to Makai, we need you here more often.
It's a pleasure, man.
Yeah, always. So now let's look at the word drug. So I was able to find numerous definitions. So I'll start with these two right here where my mouse is at. So drug, a medicine or other substance which has a psychological effect when ingested or otherwise introduced into the body. I want you to keep introduced in your mind because there are many ways a drug can be introduced. The second definition is to administer a drug to someone in order to induce stupor or insensibility. So like an anesthesia or a narcotic. They are used to kind of put you to sleep. So again, keep those things in mind. Introduce and narcotics or narcotize or sleep in your mind. The last one is a drug is any chemical substance that causes a change in an organism's physiology or psychology when consumed. Drugs are typically distinguished from food and substances that provide nutritional support. Now, with this definition right here, we're going to take these definitions and we're going to create our own definition as well as addiction, specifically for this series. And we'll explain why, I think, in the next slide. Let me see. Oh, real quick. Another definition is any substance other than food that is used to prevent, diagnose, treat, or relieve symptoms of a disease or abnormal condition. Drugs can also affect how the brain and the rest of the body work and cause changes in mood, awareness, thoughts, feelings, or behavior. Some types of drugs, such as opioids, may be abused or lead to addiction. So this is a definition of, these are definitions of drugs. So now, like I said, we're going to do a new definition specifically for this series, because the point is we need to kind of rewire your thought process of corn. Because really, in general, corn is now viewed as just a genre of entertainment, right? It's not really a taboo unless you're like in so-called religious settings. And really, you cannot tell if someone is watching, addicted, or indulging in corn just based off the look. It's something that you have to be like very spiritually inclined in. So with that being said, you're not going to look at corn as, oh man, like no one's on the street talking about, hey brother, do you have any tapes? Like a crackhead. No one's doing that on the corner. So it's kind of hard to classify this as a drug. We can classify it as addiction because we hear it all the time. But the problem is you can't call it an addiction unless you acknowledge that it's a drug. Many times we just acknowledge corn as just an entertainment that we're addicted to. The thing is, you got to acknowledge it as a drug if you're going to classify yourself as an addiction or just drawn to it. So with these definitions, we're going to go with drug first. Drug is any substance that is ingested that affects both the mind and the body. An addiction is a condition of the mind that causes a craving or dependency on a specific drug or substance. All right? So these are the two definitions that we're going to go with throughout this series. All right. So here's a quote by Paracelsus. Forgive me if I mispronounced that, but he said everything is a drug. It depends on the dose. So, with that being said, if everything is a drug, let's consider what we live in, right? The world that we live in wants us to feel like crap. Everything is just crappy in this world, right? You go to your job, the boss is terrible. You go to school, everything is just, there's too much schoolwork, bullies, whatever you have. You go home, family life is a mess. It seems like even the food that you eat is not real food. And then when you eat this food, you're going to feel like crap later on. The world wants you to feel like crap. Everything you watch television is some mess. You watch the news, it's something bad happened. Something bad happened 2 seconds later. Something bad happened. And then you go on, you listen to music, it's about death, killing, drop it to the floor, whatever. So you keep, and this has an effect on your mind where now you're now attracted to this stuff. Because it's being advertised to you everywhere. And so, whether you know it or not, your subconscious cannot tell the difference between reality and what is not real. So with that being said, it's going to, in anything, you're going to feel those effects. And this will cause you to take cigarettes, smoking, weed. I know a lot of black people going to get mad at this one. But yes, weed is a drug and it is unhealthy for you. Okay? So that goes into that too. Alcohol is an addiction. That's how we try to relieve our stress. Corn is an example. Even food. There's a term called food addiction. People eat so much that they become obese, become sick, because they are trying to drown their sorrows in food. Music can be an example of addiction, because you may be addicted to the wrong kind of music, which causes you to start dressing in a certain way. You wonder why people listen to one of these rappers now that talk about murder and death and kill. Why you think people are now dressing like them, acting like them? I don't know the name, but there's this rapper with a ski mask that always wears a ski mask, and now people are starting to wear those.
Pooh Shiesty.
There we go. Thank you, Pooh Shiesty. So, music can have an effect on your mind as well. TV, what you watch on TV, has a direct effect. I remember when I was younger, Happy Feet. I used to watch Happy Feet all the time. And my mom would say, after you watch that, you start acting like a penguin. And you started making penguin noises to random strangers. But that shows the effect of how that movie had an effect on me as a child. So, these things can be drugs if you're not careful. Now, I know the question is, well, what does this act of corn or addiction in general have anything to do with Israelites? What does this have to do with us knowing who we are, with us trying to get out of captivity? What does this have to do with that knowledge? Well, there are elites, there are nations that plot against us all the time, trying to see how to keep us down, how to keep us from having that connection with our Elohim, because all nations know that if we're connected to Elohim, if we're connected to the Most High Yahuwah, right, that, oh man, we screwed. We can't let these Negroes get close to their God, because if they do that, oh no, we're going to die, basically. So, and this is why in Psalms chapter 2, it says, why did the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahuwah and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. Again, so as you can probably tell, I'm going to connect this corn addiction to a much broader scheme. Because whether you like it or not, corn affects families. It keeps people apart. When someone realizes that you're getting your sexual satisfaction from a computer screen as a man looking at other women, and even women looking at other men, or vice versa nowadays, it tends to tear families apart, right? And that's what the nations want. See, because the thing about it, everybody knows this, that most all nations in history started from a group of families. I mean, you look at our history. We started from Abraham, and if you really want to get more accelerated, we started from Yaakov or Jacob. Jacob had a family, and from that family, Yahuwah said, I'm going to make that family into a prosperous nation, and it's going to be above the nations. So they know this, these nations know this, and so what they have to do is they have to get rid of the family, because the family is the foundation of a nation. A family is a foundation of a community is a foundation of a nation, and a nation is a foundation of an empire. That's usually how it goes. But in order to prevent that, you got to start from the foundation, which is family. So that's why all these, when we as Israelites, we go through all these things like crack epidemic, they put those in our communities. Even when it comes to abortion, why is every abortion clinic in our communities? You have to ask these questions. Yes, it seems like a good thing, my body, my choice, but you have to understand that you're killing the future seed of Israel when you're making that decision. And they're advertising to who? Us. White women already done that. That's a whole nother video. But what we're saying is there are plots against our growth as a nation, right? And so this also goes into corn, because not only does it break up families, but bro, you're wasting your seed. You're wasting your legacy. What you're spilling on a sock, right, should be into a woman, which helps produce a child. And that child produces another child, and over time that produces a nation. You're wasting your seed on a woman you do not know on a computer screen. So you can see how this is a part of the scheme against Israel. And not a lot of people talk about that. We will talk about weed, talk about alcohol, talk about all these things that affect us as a community. But I don't see Farrakhan talking about how porn broke up the black family. I don't see that. So this is why I felt it was very important for us to talk about this. So I was, in researching this topic, came across this article called Divorce Rates Double When People Start Watching Porn. As you see on the subtitle, it says, but is porn to blame for rocky marriages, or is it merely a symptom? So real quick, I'm going to exit out this slide real quick, and I will share the article with you. Hold on. Yeah, okay. All right. Let me get this ad out of the way. Okay. So the article starts off by saying there's an oft-quoted rule on the internet: if it exists, there is porn of it. Even if that's an exaggeration, there's no question that men and women have been consuming more sexually explicit content since the world went online. Now, a new study looks at how this consumption might affect marriage in the United States. The study, a working paper presented this week at the 2016 American Sociological Association's annual meeting, suggests that men and women who begin to consume pornography partway through their marriages are more likely to get a divorce than their non-porn consuming peers. The study has not been peer-reviewed, but it raises no major methodical flags, meaning that there's no contradictions in the study, and does a good job of considering alternative explanations for the findings, says cornography expert Anna Bridges, a psychologist at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, who was not involved in the work. Previous studies on porn and marriage have suggested that consuming sexually explicit material isn't good for marital health. But many of these studies have been based on cross-sectional data that give only a snapshot of porn use and marital happiness. Now, researchers have been able to analyze how pornography impacts marriage over multiple years. So, the new paper uses data from 2006 all the way to 2014 General Social Survey, a regular poll that asked thousands of Americans for their opinions on everything from national spending priorities to morality. Because the same people are polled several years in a row, researchers can track how attitudes, behaviors, and lifestyles change over time. To measure cornography use, the survey asked respondents, who also reported their relationship status, whether they had watched an X-rated movie in the past year. There's no perfect cornography question, but this one comes closest to the kind of question you ask that carries over time, says study author and sociologist Samuel Perry of the University of Oklahoma in Norman. Out of 5,698 respondents, 1,681 said they had watched an X-rated movie, and 373 reported viewing one for the first time during the survey period. So you can see that a lot more people have already have watched these things prior to this survey. So you can see how already this has become normalized in our society. Analyzing the data, Perry and his OU colleague Cyrus Schleifer found that people who started watching porn were more likely to split with their partners during the course of the survey. For men, the chance of divorce went from 5% to 10%. For women, that number jumped from 6% to 18%. So it tripled for women and it doubled for men. And here's just a chart of trying to okay, so this is part for men. Yeah, divorce rates for non-viewers is 5%. After you view it, it goes up to 10%. That's the red, is the divorce rates for new viewers or people who start watching porn. And the peach color bar is for those who have not watched it at all. All right, and this is comparing divorce rates this is prior to watching it, and this is after watching it. All right, and you can see for women it has tripled in this fair. All right, just to provide some understanding on the chart. But is pornography use actually causing the problems, or is it merely a symptom of an already unhappy marriage? Perry believes the data shows causation. We're pretty confident based on the statistical analysis that we did. And I want to pause here real quick because there's a principle, I think it's also in psychology, right, about causation and correlation, where correlation does not equal causation. So you can have two things that are relatable, and they correlate, but that doesn't mean that one data determine the other part of the data. But causation says that this part of the data actually causes this part of the data. So that's why. So I just want to make that clear for anyone out there. So article continues, we are nearing where we can say there's a directional effect. They note that when women stop watching porn, their divorce rates dropped from 18% back down to 6%. The effect was less apparent in men, however. Most of the men surveyed, between 55% and 70%, watched porn to begin with, and very few stopped once they started. So already we see a problem because, again, I'm really making this for men, and this is the reason why. Because even before this survey, they already started watching this. And there's no difference because they haven't stopped watching it. Despite these weaknesses, the article continues, despite these weaknesses, Bridges says that Perry's explanation is still the most likely. In addition to gender differences, the study revealed differences in porn use and divorce in different demographic groups. The younger the respondent, the more likely they were to get a divorce after starting to view porn. In contrast, porn and divorce showed a weaker link in people who attended an organized worship service at least once a week and said they were religious. I want to pause right here where it says the younger respondents. It shows you how when the younger you view something, right, the more, so your mind is more absorbent to things when you're younger, especially as a little child. But if you're talking about young couples, you're probably talking about, in some cases, maybe 19, 20 to about, let's say, 29 or 30, right? if your mind is still absorbing things, and especially if you're younger, and the way values have just, changed over the years. When it comes to marriage, there was for better or for worse, right? And now those are just chants that you say at a wedding instead of promises that you say at a wedding. So when it comes to this addiction, you see that younger people it's not tolerable, and it's not being able to handle because values have drastically changed from when our parents were kids and grandparents and so on and so forth. Let's start at the latter. So the latter finding surprised the researchers, who initially thought that adding cornography into more religious marriages would lead to higher rates of divorce. Despite the new findings, Perry says he's not advocating a ban on pornography. My colleague and I are trying to report what we think are interesting and relevant results, and we are not trying to contribute to a moral crusade against corn use, he says. Information is a positive thing, and we hope we can contribute in that way. So here, we are trying to give you information to ban it in your mind. We know we can't ban it physically. Unfortunately, we go to jail for that. But we're trying to ban it in your mind. Because the thing about it has from my experience, even when I just had an appetite for it, I wasn't watching it every day, it really affected my life a lot. You'll hear more about those in future episodes or live streams. That's what they call them on YouTube. Okay, so learning the lingo, but no matter how often you watch this stuff, it still affects your mind anyway. And so, with that, I just want to read that article to show you that there is a scheme in this production of pornography to separate families. So now let me just go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so now, as I stated before, as I stated before, the nations are plotting against us when it comes to our growth and our connection with the Most High, right? And the thing about it is, this is kind of a war. I want you to think about this as a war against your appetite or your addiction to pornography. Because the thing about this is, you are going to have to understand that Satan is going to attack you with this stuff. See, the thing is, and I always had this question, I've had this problem since 15 years old. And when 15 and I was enjoying it, I didn't really have any conviction over it. School was fine. Everything was working out, right? Once I started to try to get out of it, that's when hell broke loose. And the reason why is because, Satan doesn't attack people who he has. That's not, it's like, okay, you have a business and you hire people as your employees. Once you have them on your team, there's no need in trying to abuse them some more. Because you don't even abuse employees. You don't even abuse people to try to get employees, right? You're enticed into a job, right? Oh, this pays this amount of money, I need to apply, and they hire you, right? Mm-hmm. So once they have you, there's no use in trying to make life worse for you, because that's how they're going to lose employees, thus losing business. Mm-hmm. So Satan is not. So if he already enticed you into this situation, so he already got you. There's no reason to constantly make your life worse than it already is, right? Mm-hmm. But once you try to leave, oh dang, man, you start getting bows and arrows spiritually just knocked at you. You'll have a day plan, and all of a sudden something happens trying to get you back into watching it. Mm-hmm. See? So I want you to think of this as a war. That's why I have this picture up here of generals plotting their battlefront. And the thing is, again, I want to reiterate how this is going to be geared towards men. Again, women can watch if you feel that's going to be edifying to you. But again, I want to express coming from a man's perspective. And the thing is, as Israelite men, we have a duty of leading our families to the Most High. We have a duty of protecting our communities. We have a duty of raising children according to the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. The question is, how are we going to do that when we're not walking in that? Cornography it may not be considered adultery if you don't want to classify it as that, but it is considered fornication, and that is against the law. And even if you go to the New Testament, Paul talks about that. He talks about these fornicators, these liars, fornicators, whoremongers. They will not have unclean, right? They will not have opportunity to enter into the kingdom, right? So we, as Israelite men, want to enter into that kingdom. How are we going to enter into the kingdom when we're stuck on fornication? And even if you do not want to watch this, the fact is that you're still fornicating. The thing is, if you don't want to, you need to strive to get out of that. And so as men, we can't be wasting our seed on things that cause us to fornicate. I believe it was Paul. He says, shall I unite the body of Christ with a prostitute? God forbid. So these are things as Israelite men that we have to consider, because when we get rid of this completely, not just I just watch it once a month. No, completely, you have no idea how much powerful we'll be as men, and how much we'll be able to get ready for that coming captivity, freedom of captivity, and that journey in the wilderness towards the kingdom. I think it's in Isaiah. He said that he'll make a man as pure gold, even as the gold of Ophir. So that means a lot of things that we have to get rid of in order to become that kind of man. So that's why it's important for us to understand that this is a war against pornography. This is something that we have to fight against. All right, so we have to have our armor on, the shield of faith, the breastplate of righteousness. I think I have the verse right here. Yeah, Ephesians 6, verse 13 to 16. Therefore, put on the full armor of Elohim, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything to stand. Stand firm with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. So, with that being said, we have to be ready to fight against this addiction or appetite. But the thing is, how can we fight against it if we don't know the backgrounds about it? And that's what this series is about. So I want you to stay tuned for more live streams, because we're going to talk about how it happened, how it was started here in America specifically, how it got into our homes, how it got on the internet. We're going to talk about how these things came into effect, and then we're going to bring it down to individuals, things about how general analysis of how an individual gets into that addiction, and then we're going to talk about strategies. But the thing is, we have to learn about this thing, so it's not going to be a 5-minute video, all right, like what senior retention does. We're trying to break that. We're trying to give you an in-depth thing, because we want you to overcome this. We really do. So this is the end. So again, this is the intro video, and we're going to be studying. We're going to be looking at scripture. We're going to be looking at historical documents, or really Supreme Court cases that relate to this topic, to show you the enemy's tactics of trying to get us to be attracted to this. So this is the end of this first episode. I do hope you like it. Please tune in to the next one, because this is very important information for all Israel, especially Israelite men. So that's all we have for today. Thank you for tuning in. And with that being said, Shalom.